was born in New York City.
Oh, you're in New York City.
The
Oh,
Bronx,
okay.
Alexander Avenue.
Learn new things all the time, see?
Isn't that true? There, you see? Keeping it a deep, dark secret.
And then when did you move to Jersey?
Oh, when I was about 3 or 4, I guess. We lived in Jersey for years. We came to Yonkers when I was about 10. We moved to Hastings when I was 11. So that was 1921.
And your dad moved to Yonkers. Was he a baker in Jersey?
Yes.
And did he have...
Oh, and did other things over there too, you know, because during the war, when bakeries weren't doing so hot, that's when he drove that produce truck.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother had a little, what they called they got the food in from somewhere else and she sold it.
Yeah.
What did they call those? They used to do that in those days quite often. And then my father put in his own ovens in the window and did his own baking and, you know.
Where was that?
Elizabeth.
Oh, this is Elizabeth.
Yeah, he must have had 3 or 4. But then we moved to Yonkers to Ashburton Avenue, and we only stayed there 6 months. And then he sold that and bought the one in Hastings.
That was, where was that located?
Where,
Post office is, was?
no, where the beauty shop is now at the foot of Ballard Avenue.
Oh.
And actually, the original store.
Oh, wait, it's not, is it a beauty shop? Is it a beauty shop now?
It's a beauty shop now.
Oh, I thought it was Dior or whatever. It's some, no.
What?
I thought it was one of these specialty houses next to the...
The first store he didn't buy.
Mm-hmm.
He rented from George Schutz.
Mm-hmm.
And that was where the printing place was.
Mm-hmm.
Is that still in there now? Next to the post office, next to Sammy Caruso.
Oh,
That
that's
was
right.
a bakery
Oh,
with
really?
the big oven built in the
sure.
back. It was a set up for a bakery.
Mm-hmm.
And did you know that there were 2 old houses behind that?
No.
Well, that bakery still had an outdoor privet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was no facilities.
But that was his first bakery right there.
That was his first bakery here
Right.
in Hastings, in that building.
That's where the creative presses and
I guess
printers,
that's
right.
what it's
Yeah.
called now.
Oh, that was Uncle John's place before that.
Yeah, he was in there too for a while. I mean, there have been numberless
Yeah.
things in there since then, but it had never been used for anything. It was a butcher shop after that.
Mm-hmm.
John that worked for Al had a
Sure.
butcher shop in there.
Right, I didn't know that.
But at that time, it was all set up for a bakery, but there were 2 old frame houses, and the one, that was a driveway there all the time, going down. And the one was right behind that bakery on the left, and people by the name of Scott lived in there. And then behind it was one that faced Warburton Avenue, and that's where the Taborers all lived.
Oh, yeah,
You know, that
sure.
big family.
Sure.
Well, they lived back there
Oh,
at that time.
Mm-hmm. That wasn't too far from the
And
church
then where the post office is now was where Bill Finley had a plumber shop right there.
Right.
You know, a frame building.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that?
Yes, sure.
And then my dad and Joe Devine built the building where Electrolux is now, and he built it for the post office.
Mm-hmm.
And my father did his side for the bakery. And
What year was that they built that?
Well, I don't think we stayed in the old store that long, Jerry. Maybe, well, it was before I was married, so it must have been 24, 25. That they built. There must be a cornerstone on that thing somewhere with a date.
That's right.
And they built that with a party wall. you know,
Sure.
and put the building up together. And that's when Joe Devine still had the garage next door and the taxi office was in there too.
Oh, yeah.
Divine's Taxi.
Did Glasberg's, you had that corner place where,
Glasgow?
yeah, one time he had a showroom, he rented, remember Ted Glasberg had for a very short time.
No,
was
but
up
you
there.
know who was across the street? Where Stella has her little shop. At one time, that was Duveen, the antique dealer, had a showroom in there. But it also belonged to a tailor, Emery Rush. Had the tailor shop in the front there
Oh, sure.
and lived upstairs.
St. Matthew's Church was, where was it at that point?
When I came to Hastings, it's where it is now.
What did they do with the old building? Was it torn down?
Which one, the
The
old
old
church
St. Matthew's,
building?
yeah.
I guess so. That was before my time. I know nothing about that except I saw pictures of it, you know.
Sure. What were some of the other businesses nearby?
Well, there was nothing up at that end. There were no businesses up there.
The gas
But
station
while
was
we
there?
were there, well, Jack Riley had
At
his
the corner.
at the corner,
Right.
and then the two old houses, the one that is Hoffman's house
Mhm.
on Villar, and the one that is John the Butcher's on Whitman Street, were two of the houses that were down on the corner of Warburton and North Street. And then they were moved, and
Oh, really?
then Jack Riley expanded to the whole corner.
That must have been some job
You know,
to move.
they moved them up Villar Avenue.
Wow. I
That
didn't
wasn't
know.
as big
Yeah.
a job as moving Grace Church up
No,
Main Street.
no.
That was something that kept everybody titillated. But it was in that time that the honeymoon flats were built, I know, around 24. Because originally my father had a binder on a piece of property on that side of the street. He wanted to build closer to the village.
Yeah.
But there was so much rock there that when he got an estimate, you know, on the, so then it was some form of a big corporation that came in and did all that.
Was the movie house built at that point? Was the movie house?
Oh, sure, the movie house was there when we came to Hastings, and people by the name of Forster Hastings owned it. And he also owned the little candy store.
Oh,
That's
next door.
Sandy.
Right. Oh,
He
that was
also-
before
Before Brunings.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Forster Hastings.
Oh, I didn't know.
And they lived in Tower Ridge, a couple of girls, and Mr. and Mrs. Hastings. And I'm trying to think what would, I guess the Hastings, one of the papers was where Small Huntsman.
Oh, they did
Somewhere
have,
in
that's
there.
right, they did have a print, I remember he has a big concrete block there. He had a
Yes.
big printing press on it.
Yes. And then, of course, later on, you know, the one that was across the street where the garage is was also a paper at one time that Henry ran.
Oh, was it down, where was it?
Where the garage is, Bob,
Oh, over him
Yeah.
on Broadway.
you know,
Yeah.
they had that set
Sure.
up as a print
Mhm.
place. And
But did they, when they printed down where Smallhouse is now, did they print a paper or just?
now I don't remember.
Remember?
You know, Jerry, I was young and I
Yeah.
didn't pay that much attention to it, but I know, well, I think Frank told you about that because he worked there at one
Yeah.
time. But I know they had printing presses in there, you could hear them
Yeah.
printing up. And around on Spring Street was, what's his name? A real old timer.
What kind of business?
Had, and I'm trying to think what he was. He used to smoke a cigarette with a pin in it. You know?
Yeah, sure.
I can see him, and I can't remember his name. Yes, so I was thinking about it when I was waiting for you to come over. And of course, Henry McGuckin was one of our local characters, who was the undertaker for Bacon.
Oh.
But he was well known by everyone, and we all loved him dearly because his sister was an actress.
Oh.
And he had trunkload of costumes. And if there was a big masquerade or a big dance or something, and you wanted a costume, if Henry liked you, he'd let you borrow something. Gorgeous things.
Where did he live?
He lived in the
Bakers?
at that time, and he was there for years and years and years.
Where were you living when you first opened the store in Hastings?
We lived over what was out. It was at that time Butler's, I guess. And we had a cold water flat up there. At that time, there was a dreadful shortage of rooms. You couldn't find a place to live.
Why?
As a matter, I don't know, Jerry. Again, I mean, that's only something I realized later, you know. It wasn't my worry at that time about where you're going to live. But I do know that when we moved to Hastings, people by the name of Kazalka had owned the store. And they were going to move to White Plains or something, but were waiting to get in a house. And so we had like 2 rooms. You could get in from the front door. You know, the old tenements had a hallway inside.
Yes.
And there was a bedroom and a living room up in the front that you could open the front door and go in those and close and lock the door between. And we lived with all our furniture in those 2 rooms until they could move out. And we could move in that apartment. And that's the only way we got an apartment.
How long did that go on?
Oh, a couple of months. I don't know.
Wow.
But, you know, it was a long
Sure.
time when you're...
Sure.
And it wasn't where we wanted to live.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a horrible place at that time. No heat, no electricity, and
What did
my
you use
mother,
to heat? Did you have a little wood stove or coal?
nothing, because we didn't live there really. We only slept there. My mother did all the cooking at the bakery, and we only went home to go to bed.
Right.
We didn't even have breakfast there.
So it must have been pretty cold at night.
It was terrible.
What
I
happened?
tell you, that was the time that my mother made us these sleeping things out of Indian blankets. And they even covered your face, because if you ever lay down on one of those pillows, you'd freeze to it. Had mittens, feet, and she would light the gas stove and get those warm, because, that place was like Siberia. And
How old were you at that time, did you say?
11.
11.
And so Helen was 14. And then when, of course, my father built his own place, well, of course, we had all the amenities, but
Well,
we
you lived
certainly hadn't
above
lived-
above the store when you did.
Yes,
Yeah.
there were 6 beautiful rooms. Very nice apartment. But that was horrendous. We were happy to come up.
Okay. This
All
Butler's
the-
was a grocery store, wasn't it?
Well, sure.
Yeah.
And you know the basement, what it was like with old boxes and old,
Sure.
they weren't that careful in those days. And all the doors in our apartment when we moved in had pieces of tin on the bottom of the door where the rats had gnawed on. So we got out of there just as fast as we could get out of there. But there was absolutely nowhere to live. And if the Kazalkas weren't moving out, I don't know what we would have done. I don't know where we would have lived. But,
What were some of the other businesses in town at that time?
well, George Schutz had his butcher store up on stilts,
Where was that?
on where the diner is now. Do you have any of those old pictures?
I don't have
You
any
went up
picture of
about 4 steps to the store,
To the-
and it was like double windows, right where the diner is.
Yes.
And
Was that the diner that was finally moved down onto Spring Street?
No, there's
Oh,
no,
that's-
there was no
Oh,
diner
there was
at that time.
another diner later on.
Well, that's the one that is actually, was where, there was a diner where, Aloysio's.
Aloysio's. That's a different diner.
yeah,
Oh,
there was no diner.
Mhm.
I'm just saying Schutz's is where
oh,
the center,
yes. Oh, I see.
Restaurant
Yes,
is.
right.
it was there.
Mhm.
And so was Charlie Nealon's stationery store.
Right.
And that also you went upstairs.
Well, why'd they build it on stilts?
Well, they were old.
Yeah.
You know, that's the way everything was built. Everything you went upstairs. Where the bank is now, there was a great big old house. Then there was a small taxpayer that had rooms upstairs, and I don't remember who owned that, but at one time, Mrs. Harry Roback had a sewing machine place in there. And I don't know whether she did sewing or whether she sold sewing machines. And at one time, my sister had a little dress shop. It was a two-part store.
Oh,
And I think at one time there was a shoemaker's in there. You know, they kept
sure.
changing. But they were little wooden stores.
Were they usually filled in underneath the stilts, or were they exposed? You could see underneath the store.
I think they had those grates. I don't know what was under them. Maybe they didn't have any cellars under them, Jerry. You know, I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
And behind those stores, there were one or two big, old wooden houses
I remember
back
those.
there.
Yeah,
You must
sure.
remember those.
That's why they built the garage.
Yeah, and that was Henry Suplecki's lived back there. And somebody else with big families lived back there. And then, of course, on the corner, and then when they moved Grace Church, I guess they tore down the old building that was the manse at that time.
Why did they move the church? I never did.
I guess they sold the property.
You got a good enough price to
I'm
get
sure it must have been, because now, I don't know whether that was moved before Kaufman's building went up on the corner. I don't have any idea, Jerry, really. You know how distances look so different. I mean, at that time, it seemed to me that the manse and the church took up an awful lot of room. But I'm sure it would have fit in where the parking lot is now.
Sure. I don't remember the church.
But then when they took that out, that's when they put a garage there that Bobby Cook ran,
Right.
and then Chappie owned. And then they took that out to put the parking lot in.
Yeah.
Well, I don't remember ever what was behind it then. There's still those old houses.
The old
must have
houses
been
were there
until they took it
the
out
parking
for the
lot, I think.
parking.
Yeah. They were there a long time. Falling down.
And we used to have a Reeves store in Hastings on Main Street.
All the stores, most of the stores delivered those days, didn't they?
I don't know. Because you see, we lived in the village, there's been
They wouldn't have known.
no reason for my mother to have things sent. Because she had 2 kids, she could send to the store. And of course, Ferreras.
Yeah.
I guess my mother had things sent from Ferreras, but,
Why don't you tell me about, you worked in the store a lot, didn't you?
oh yes, we all did. I mean, that was a family-run business. My father ran the delivery routes, and then after Frank and I were married, Frank and I, but, you know, he ran the delivery route, and I ran the store in Dobbs Ferry, a little...
Oh, you had a store in Duxbury too?
On Senior Street.
Well, who did the baking there?
My father did it, and then Frank brought it up. And,
Well, he'd bake in each store?
no, just in the Hastings.
Oh, he baked in Hastings store? Oh,
And then it was
that was an
delivered
outlet,
up
right,
there.
right.
It was just an outlet store. And it was a great big store, too.
Where was that?
Right on Cedar
Oh.
Street. I think it's where
That's all?
where Ann and Eddie Hewitt and Josephine had their
Right.
Travel Bureau, that's
Right,
where.
sure, I know it is. What time did you start in the morning?
7 to 7, you know, you worked in those.
So your father actually started baking before
Oh, he
7?
baked during the night.
Hmm.
That was a stopover for everyone. You know, the cops would come in for a hot cup of coffee, and when the hot bread came out, in those days, people would stop on their way home from the movies, and he would have hot rolls and hot buns ready for 9 o'clock when the movies got out.
Right.
He baked, you know, different things. The bread bakers got out of the way so the cake bakers could bake. The cake bakers were more apt to be baking from, say, 5 or 6 in the morning, and my father's would be done. He would start like at 9, and there would be limited things at 9 o'clock, and that would practically be sold.
Right.
While we weren't in the store, my father sold whatever.
Hi, how you doing?
So,
That's a nap.
so,
But who were the bakers for the cake bakers? Who there some
oh, well, they
people
were always
that-
different, you know. We had a couple of famous ones, Bill Kopinski and Harry Green, and cake bakers are individualists, and they're all prima donnas, but my father did all the bread things.
Would they go from one store to another, or they would just work for your father at that time?
Oh, well, they would just work, you know, they worked long hours. They might work from 5 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon, depending on what there was to be done, so, but,
Here's the paper. Did you get the wrong paper?
No.
no.
Oh,
Now you can have one, Jerry, to take home. So, most businesses in Hastings used to open at 7 in the morning
and what time
and
did
stay
they?
open till 7 o'clock at night. I mean, nobody worked fewer hours than that. Well, look at calendars. When they first came to Hastings, I think they opened at 5. Early edition papers. Remember, people used to go to work early in those days. No such thing as opening at 8 o'clock. I mean, even the plants, I guess, opened at 7. And then they stayed open at night for the last edition of the paper.
Yeah.
Just like years ago, we used to get 2 mail deliveries.
Sure.
Everything was,
Right, yeah, well,
you
yeah,
got much more.
yeah. But I think I remember you telling me that some people like Dr. Mink used to have take meals with
Yes,
you.
they
Well,
did.
how'd that work out?
Just because they had no real housekeepers or anything. Kate and Father Dashwood, and they would come in and have dinner with us. And
In the store itself, or?
in the bakery, in the back.
Yeah.
We had a room upstairs, but you never had time to go upstairs and eat. So we ate in the back, at the bench.
Yeah.
And we always had dinner.
Did Dr. Mink have that house at that point?
Oh, no, he lived in the Kaufman building,
Oh.
where we all lived on 13 Main
Sure,
Street.
sure.
He had his office
Oh,
there.
well, once the Main Street was built by Kaufman?
I don't know why I always call it the Kaufman building. Was it, honey? Do you remember? 13 Main Street, was that Kaufman's building? I always call it Kaufman's.
I
I
know
don't
he
know
built the
why.
Hastings House restaurant.
Oh, yes,
But
that
I didn't
was
know-
I don't
long
quite
before
understand
that.
what you mean.
Where Benson
113
is.
Main Street, where we lived at one
The
time.
Benson store, above
Benson.
Benson's store.
Oh.
Did Kaufman build that?
Kaufman had nothing.
They did,
They
but
did.
I mean, it was
Yeah.
always called Kaufman's Corner.
Yeah.
Now,
You know
don't
why it was
ask me
called
why.
Kaufman's Corner?
Well,
Why?
The Kaufman's house.
That's right, they lived there on that corner. That's
Kaufman's
the other
house
house that
was
was there.
There, right on the corner.
the same Kaufman?
Yeah,
Oh,
Yeah, I can
Before
remember
they
playing on the
built-
porch, watching the trolley stop there.
before they built the houses up here, you
Mhm.
know, on Hoppy or Olinda, wherever they.
oh, is that where they moved? I didn't
Yeah,
know.
they were there too. Those 2 red brick
Mhm.
houses
Mhm.
were built.
One was one brother and one was the other.
and they both lived there. But that's why it was called Kaufman's Corner. And he had an office there. And Father Dashwood's lived next door to us in Joe Devine's building. Had a 3-room apartment. And he didn't have a housekeeper, so he had a
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how many restaurants there were in town. I guess Frisbee's, which is Nana's, and, well, Kaufman's was very plush.
I remember eating at one time they had real linen napkins and
Of course,
fine silver.
of course.
Very, very
It was very
luxurious.
lovely. And back in those days, there was a line killer who was the doorman.
From Broad
He was
Avenue?
there.
That line?
No, it was Sid's. I don't know what relationship. But in uniform.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
I think you mentioned that sometimes you would make up orders to go each day for certain people who had regular
Yeah, that was part of the thing.
roles of...
Everybody that was a steady customer, you had standing orders, like the 3 rolls and 2 buns, or a loaf of bread on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and on Tuesday and Thursday they may get a loaf of rye bread instead of a loaf of white bread. And those orders were made up. The bags were written out every night, and then whoever was driving, which was Frank at that time, filmed them and delivered them.
What time would the orders go out? Would you deliver them
5 o'clock.
in the morning?
And then there was a second delivery where you went around with these big trays with cake and
Go to the store?
pie. No, from house to house, just like Dugan's used to come around,
Oh,
remember?
yeah,
That
sure.
was, Dugan's was
Yeah.
afterwards. And you'd go to your steady customers. Again, at that hour of the day, you had steady customers who wanted certain things on certain days. They didn't want them for breakfast, they wanted them later. And then you'd deliver those things, and you'd also go and tell the people what you had, like peach pie,
Sure, that's it.
and then run downstairs and get them and bring them back upstairs, and then charge them, and then make out itemized bills for everybody. And those days, a dozen rolls was 20 cents, and yet no such thing as just writing it off as 20 cents, 3 rolls. And that went Dobbs Ferry and Hastings. And I mean all of Hastings, Hudson Heights, the Manor,
Winter too.
Warburton Avenue as far as below the Yonkers line. We had a couple of customers beyond the Hastings line.
Well, you went to school and you went to public school.
I only went to 8th grade here and I graduated. And then I went only 1 year to high school.
Which building did you go to school in?
The high school building, the
The
one
elementary
that's
school.
set back.
When you went to elementary school, which building was it? In the Farragut?
8th grade was still in that one building.
Oh,
Now, at the
that's
time
right.
I went, they only had the big elementary and the high school building. And the high school didn't take up the whole building, so 8th grade was in the high school building.
Well, what grade did you go to when you first arrived there?
8th.
Oh, I see.
I'm trying to think. Lincoln Owens had a store in the village at one time. Now, he did printing, but he was in the honeymoon flat
Yes, I still remember that
somewhere.
story.
And
Was Miss
then
Owens
he married
biology
Bertha
then?
Owens. Yeah, the biology teacher. And of course, while I was in school was Dr. Hopkins. And although when I first came to Hastings, the principal was what's his name, Murphy?
I think that's the name I heard.
And then he moved out, and then They got
Dr.
Dr. Hopkins and Teddy Myers came in then. So I guess that's when the school expanded more. I think at one time they only had one principal and that was it.
Right.
Then
Once you started working, did you have much time to did you have to work most of the day, or
you worked all day. You know,
did you have much time to play?
none at all at that point because I was out of school because I wasn't well. And it was not considered the thing to work in the store and then play with kids.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It
You
wasn't-
work, you work.
You work, that's it. And of course I got married young, so that was something else. But, you know, and I remember when we were kids, you walked home for lunch, and you walked back to school, and you walked home after school, and nobody thought you were being a beauty.
Yeah.
And that's when old Cap Connell was always on the 5 points. That was his post. That was Puss Connell's father.
Yeah.
And all the kids walked. I think they even used to walk over from...
This is Mary Allison on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, 1995, and I'm about to interview Genevieve, known as Jimmy Lynch, who lives at 555 Broadway in Hastings-on-Hudson. Okay, so you were in Hastings during the war,
Yes,
the entire
yes.
time.
We came to Hastings in 21.
Oh, you did? But you had grown up here, hadn't you?
Well, I was 11 when I came, and the
Oh.
rest, I've lived here ever since.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember where you were and what you were doing when you heard about the attack on Pearl Harbor?
Yes, we lived at 99 Washington Avenue, and Frank was working for Anaconda, and he was working days at that point. Before that, he had been a foreman and worked the 4 to 8 shift in the morning. But at that point, he was in charge of the weatherproof department. And he, after the war began, he also was in charge of the, what did they call the groups that they had for when there was an alarm.
An air raid drill?
Yes. Whenever there was anything going on, he was in charge for the whole plant. And they worked weird hours because you never knew, what was going on. And as I remember, the children said that they never remember doing without too much. And we did have gas for the car. I didn't use it, but Frank had to have it because if someone called in or someone was sick, he had to take them. If someone didn't come in, he had to go pick up someone to fill in.
Mm-hmm.
So we weren't isolated.
Well, did you remember what you were doing that Sunday, December 7th, 1941, when the news came about Pearl Harbor?
I'm sure we heard it, but no, I really don't remember. I remember when Kennedy was shot because I was listening, but I don't remember that one.
Did you know that the war was coming?
Oh, well, I think we listened to Franklin D. Roosevelt, every single time he was on. And I think we listened that night when he made his first announcement about that. We probably were in bed listening.
I think the announcement was the next day. when he declared war on Japan.
Well, I don't know, we heard something about the bombing, and I thought it was at night, but I'm not sure. But, of course, Frank was aware of it because they called him immediately, and he went into work, and they started to get very busy. And
Had they been prepared to go into 24-hour?
I don't know, because that was sort of hush-hush, because nobody wanted to admit, I think, that we were going to go into a war. But I think that all the managerial staff had been alerted, because they suddenly put this right into work, and it went on from that day.
And they'd started the 24-hour shifts right away? They must have had to hire more workers then.
Oh, yes, they did. They did. I don't remember. Now, that information could be in some of that material I gave you, because there was war material in that.
Mm-hmm.
And,
In leafing quickly through it, I haven't read it
yes.
page for page, but I
no.
didn't quite see that.
But I do think there was a part in there, and I'm sure I gave it to you, that laid out the rules and regulations for the plant.
Yes, I saw that.
Well, that's what I'm talking
Yeah.
about. So I was not that aware of it. Ginger was very little at that time. She was a year and a half, 2 years old. I was busy with the children and trying to keep Frank's schedule, feeding
Yeah,
and all
that
that.
must have been difficult with him working such
Well, you
strange
never knew,
and
you know.
long hours.
Yes. He might go in at 7 and not come home till midnight. And he might go in all day and go back at 7 and work till midnight. You never knew. It
No.
wasn't set, but because he was a superintendent or a supervisor, his times were very flexible.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, did they have trouble recruiting workers, because the young men certainly were going to either volunteering or being drafted?
I really don't remember that at all, whether that was a problem. I know that everybody was going off to war, but I think at that time they had an older group, steady workers, and they weren't quite so dependent on the very young ones, because nobody left the plant when they were 40 or 50 in those days, you know.
Yeah.
They went till they practically dropped, and those were the core of the people that worked.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was thinking because it went from, say, a 8-hour day to a 24-hour day.
Anaconda had always worked 8 to 4, 4 to 12.
Oh,
And some departments worked 12 to 8. But it just meant they needed more people to handle the job because there weren't enough to work. I know Frank was running all over Yonkers, Dobbs Ferry, Tarrytown, Irvington, to pick somebody up. There was no transportation, and you didn't use a car, you see. Nobody had gas.
uh-huh.
And so when he went to work, he took the car.
And he picked up
During
people.
the day, he left it at home till 4 o'clock, and I went and picked him up because they had cars at the plant that went and picked people up. But from 4 o'clock on, there was no such thing as using a company car to go.
Oh.
So Frank went and picked people up as they were needed.
There wasn't bus service?
Not at that time, no.
No.
No. And nobody had gas, and buses never used to run all night, so if it
Yeah,
happened
true.
at 12 o'clock,
Yeah.
you had no way of getting there.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Did you follow the war closely?
oh yes, we listened every single night and caught up on what was going on.
So the radio was your chief.
Oh yes,
How about the newspapers?
well yes, We both read newspapers constantly, but we depended on the pickup of the news at night.
Mhm.
Was 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock? I don't remember. It was the news that we listened to.
Well, I was in Massachusetts. I think it was 11 o'clock up there.
I think it was 10 here. Could have been 11.
Mhm. Were any of your relatives?
Oh, it seems everybody went. Jack Lynch went. Now, he was in the CBs. Is that what? Yes. Frank's sister's husband was working in something that was to do with electricity, and I don't know whether it was run by the government, but it wasn't any branch of the service. But their oldest boy was in the, like, shore patrol. The second boy was in submarines. The third boy was in the Navy. That's Jack Lindner,
No.
who's Frank's nephew.
Oh. Uh-huh.
And my sister's family, Bobby went as a pilot.
Is that your nephew or?
My nephew, my sister's son. And Edwin was a little shrimp, and they made him the observer or whatever it was that sat in that little seat in the nose.
Oh, of the plane?
Yes. I don't remember what his title was at that point. And John wasn't. Now, my son was in college, but he was in the Marine ROTC,
Mm-hmm.
and he was a little too young to go in at that point. And then they kept them there in the schools as guards, and they went to drills every week and all this.
What school was he at?
He was at Marshall in Pennsylvania.
No.
And
I didn't realize you had a son.
he's going to be 65.
Oh. Is his name Frank too?
Yes, but he was known as Hap.
Hap.
Hap. That
Oh.
was his nickname.
For Happy?
Yes. Because he had a little round face when he was a baby, and he loved people. And every time anybody stopped and talked to him, he had a big grin. They said, "Oh, here comes a happy baby." Nobody ever saw him cry but me. He was a colicky baby
Oh.
to start, but he cried enough then. So,
And you just had Hap and Ginger?
no, we had another little boy, Peter, who was born in 34, but he died in 35 of strep, when they didn't have any medications for
Or
that.
antibiotics?
And then Ginger was born in 39,
Mm-hmm.
so,
Yeah, well, she would have been very young then when the war broke
oh,
out.
yes. So, I don't think she remembers anything about it.
Oh, I wouldn't think so.
No, not a thing.
What were in general, your thoughts about the war? Was it frightening?
Oh.
Did you feel very secure here?
Well,
in
I
Hastings
felt
or-
secure enough, but of course, you worried, I think, more for your children. Like Hap would be in school, and you always wonder what would happen if there was an alarm, and your kids were in school, and you were here, and your husband was somewhere. I felt secure at night when we were all together. I wasn't as itchy about it, should I say.
Where were you? You were living on Washington Avenue at that
Yes, we
time?
were 99 Washington Avenue.
99, that must be near the top of the hill?
Yes, it's just beyond the apartment house. Mahan's house is in there and another house, and this is a duplex. The band that had the bar and grill on Warburton Avenue, did you know?
No.
That's before your time. Van owned it, and
Oh.
we lived in one side and he lived in the other.
Mm-hmm.
But I think about the time that the war was just about over, I guess, we moved to 294 Broadway. we bought a house over there in Shadow Lawn.
Oh, you
right
were
on-
mentioning that the other day.
Yes. And, but that wasn't right then. Ginger was about 4 or 5 when we moved over there.
Now, did you participate in the air raid drills?
Oh, the street did, you know, we had monitors for the whole street, and we'd get out and they would parade at night, make sure you had nothing showing, no light showing and all this. And I went and took a driver's course for Red Cross. I was never called, but I passed the test and I had my card, and you know, but I was never called. And Frank, of course, had an extended Red Cross medical card. And as a matter of fact, in Anaconda, he did an awful lot of minor things when something went wrong. He was able to do that.
Do you remember who the air raid warden was over there on Washington Avenue?
No, I really don't. Haven't
Did you know Lynn Polowitz then?
I knew her, but I didn't know. Did she live on Washington Avenue?
Yeah, but further down.
No. You see, our part had an air raid warden, because that's a long street.
Yes.
And there were a couple down below. But I don't know who, I don't remember who was, and I should.
Well, she was, the reason I mentioned Lynn was I interviewed her some months ago, and she
Yes.
said that she was an assistant warden.
Oh, well, maybe she'd even know who was a warden up at our
Yeah,
end.
I didn't think to ask her. I just thought
No,
you might have run into her
No,
that way.
if I knew it, I don't remember it now.
Were you aware that after the landings in Normandy and in Italy, did you have a feeling that what were your feelings about the war going on during the last year?
Yes, well, I was hoping that all the boys in our family, who were all Navy men, would soon be coming home. And while not all of them were situated in the zone where it was so bad, but they were all where they never knew when they were going to be sent somewhere. And John had a very horrible experience, and I don't know if he told you, and I shouldn't even tell you now, but they were being strafed by the Japanese, and they were on this little island. Did he tell you?
Yes, I think he
And
told Paul.
They dug the cave and they were there for days in the dark. No food, no nothing. And
Terrible.
when they came out, the whole platoon was sent for rest and recreation, and all of them had a mental breakdown. It was so horrible because the Japanese just kept coming over and dropping bombs. It
Terrible,
must have
terrible.
been awful for
Terrible.
those boys. And I always worried about the one in the submarine because they were all over the place. And of course you never heard from them. And you didn't know where they were. And they were all young boys.
Yeah, terrible time.
Yes, it was an awful time. So that was the way that went.
Yeah. Did you personally, or did any of your friends or acquaintances have any feelings about the Germans here in town?
Well, no. I'll tell you, because I had always lived with that in the First World War. My father was Hungarian, but my mother was born in Paris of German people, and we spoke German
did
very
you?
often because my grandmother lived with us. Now, this goes way back to 1910, and during that war, of course, nobody spoke German. We even used to go to German Sunday school, and German, they went to church and it was in German. When we first came to Hastings, Pastor von Schlichten over here in the little Lutheran church gave a sermon in German. They had a regular thing then, you know.
Yeah.
That was very common in those days. But I know my father was, well, he would never speak German, but he wasn't a German. He picked it up from my mother. And they had a big store, and the feeling in that first war was very, very strong against Germans. But nobody ever bothered my father about it.
But that feeling wasn't so strong in the Second War.
I don't know. I think it was, the feeling was against Hitler, not against the people. If there was a definite division of opinion, they blamed him for causing this, but not the people, because he was just such a villain.
Yeah. What were the biggest changes in your family life? The fact that Frank had such erratic hours?
Well, we lived very close to home, very close. Everybody did. I mean, we weren't alone, but we had friends, and we would get our families together. But then you had to ride before it got too dark.
Yeah.
You know? But we just didn't go anywhere. That was the answer.
You didn't even go down to Yonkers to the movies, or?
No, we went to the Hastings movies. See, that was in full force at that time, and it was a very nice little movie. But you never went out of town, because if you were leaving your children home, you didn't want to be that far away from them.
Right.
So,
Did any of the women that you knew go to start to work then?
oh, a lot of them did. A lot of them did. And some of them went back to work in the offices, most of them. But,
How about the war plants?
well, there were a lot of people that went to work down here in the plant at night, like in Frank's department, the weather crew, and the North Mill. And I couldn't tell you who did it at this point. That's too far back for me to go. Got too much garbage up here.
Yeah.
Dates, people,
Where was the waterproofing department?
the weatherproof.
Weatherproof?
It was just beyond where they used to have the main gate going into there,
Yeah.
and beyond the office. And it was a great big special department that was built. And they sent Frank out to Indiana to learn the business, because it was a new product here. So when he came back, that was when they set it up. And he...
What did that involve? Wrapping the wire?
I'm sure it did. You have that information you have in that book, and you have the things you can see what they did. And of course you were never allowed to go in and see it, so I never saw what he was doing. I didn't have the vaguest idea except what he told me, because no civilian went through there.
No, did they have tight security?
Oh, very. It was a government project, you know. And wire was needed for the submarines, for the airplanes, for anything. And they did all types of it. So, as I said, I never saw it. I never was inside the weatherproof.
Huh.
I'll tell you
Interesting. Did
who
they
was
have, was the security civilian or was it military?
I think it was mostly civilian, but I do think they had a couple of government men who were in the office or somewhere all the time, like a liaison person.
Yeah,
But I'll tell you who was through the whole plant was Kennedy, the father, and he brought Gloria Swanson with him.
really?
Oh, yes. Yes.
For heaven's sakes.
It caused quite a scandal.
I can imagine.
It really did.
I thought he
the
was
most-
more circumspect.
Oh, no. Oh, no. No. He wasn't. He was with her constantly.
Old Joe.
Old Joe.
Yeah, well, I know about that
Yes.
affair.
Yes. But,
Some years ago, I wrote, I worked for a guy who was putting out the Dictionary of American Scandals.
Oh, so you know about
So that was one of the
Right.
ones I wrote up. So I did a lot of research on
Now,
that.
I'm digressing, but I always wondered why Rose didn't exert more influence on her children, her boys. She let old Joe do anything he wanted with them, and it was a known fact at that time that when they got 13, he took them to the whorehouse. Now, she was such a good Catholic, such a good woman. Where was her influence? I never could reconcile that.
Yeah. So they came,
All through the plant, they gave them the red carpet treatment.
my goodness. Can you remember when that was?
Well, there were pictures in the paper about it, but I don't remember when it was.
Well, I wonder why Kennedy would have been coming to look at
He
the
was a
place.
senator at that time, I guess, wasn't he? Or was something to do in the,
Well, he was ambassador to Britain at some point.
yes, he was ambassador.
forgotten the
And I don't
dates.
know what else he was doing. Maybe during the war, he had a title of some kind. I don't remember.
My goodness. Oh, I bet that caused a stir. I've never heard of that
Oh,
before.
that was something everybody knew about, that one.
Ah,
Isn't that amazing?
yes, it certainly was. Throw off my turn. What I'm thinking. Well, did Frank earn more money as a result of?
Well, he made more money. I'm just going to get this call on.
Let's see. Heard about Kennedy visiting. So a lot of your women friends did take jobs and work during the war.
It were in war work, yes. And I think that we all did things too. I took Ginger and went down to the veterans, and they had a woman there, and it was for children whose parents were away, and the children played together, and they also taught us what to do if something happened to someone and we had to bring children in. I've forgotten what they called it. But it was in the veterans once a week, and we went there.
Wonder what that was.
Haven't the babies.
Was it one by the Red Cross or?
I can't even remember the name of the woman who started it, and we went to her house only once. My memory isn't what it used to be, and that is a few years ago.
Yes, I know. I remember some of it. How did you survive with the rationing? Did that
Fine.
change your life at all?
No, I think we had lived through depression. We learned our lesson, and so we just accepted it. I mean, everybody was in the same boat, and the townspeople were very good to everybody. They stuck to the rules, and of course we all took our fat and took it into the butchers, and we knew how much we had to, how much meat we could have, and butter and all that. And nobody seemed to make a fuss about it at all. I say, we were conditioned. If you lived through the Depression, Frank went from $75 a week to $28 during the Depression. He worked, but his pay was just cut to nothing. And we were living on Whitman Street and paying $65 a month. And the first cut he got, we moved over what was Ferrera's on Warburton Avenue, and we were paying $32 a month. And that's the first time we ever lived anywhere that cost more than our weekly salary. I was brought up to be budget-wise, and our money was no problem, but we never spent more than we had. And during the Depression, we had Peter, and we had a throat man, a baby doctor, and our regular doctor, and we had to buy a plot and bury him, and we didn't owe anyone a nickel. So, you know, we lived within, so to me, I was so used to coping, and by then, of course, he was making excellent money again. Although I will say that Anaconda was very quick to cut, but didn't give it back that fast. You know, after things were over. But he worked long hours for $28 during the Depression, and darn glad you had a job.
Yeah, I suppose so. Did you have a victory garden to help out?
No.
No.
But some people we knew had it, and so that did help us. Well,
They would share.
Frank worked such funny hours even then because, you know, that he couldn't take care of it, and I had 2 children. I couldn't go fix a garden up. And we lived right in the village. There was no place there to have it. You would have to walk to Zinzer's, you know, where they had the victory garden. And I don't even think they didn't have that during the Depression. That only went up during the war.
I thought it started during World War I. The Zinzer.
I had never heard of it.
Well, I may be wrong on that.
Well, I don't know. I could be wrong too, but we managed. We lived rather programmed lives, should I say.
Okay. Did you? So there weren't any real scarcities.
Well, I think there were, but if you couldn't get it. Yes,
Yeah.
a big white building, and it was very popular. And nobody went really in pairs. It was kind of a thing where the girls get together and walk down, and the boys would go, and you might only go from 7 till 9, and you go home. And they had them in what's now the hook and ladder. Downstairs, there was the big room that the men use now, and you'd go in there, and well, this is earlier than that, than before the war. There was a music shop right in that line of little buildings before you come to the Harmon place, you know, where Rosie has a automobile supply in it now, right at the youth center. And we would get an old machine, it was about that big, and it played a metal record this big. Now this is going way back, 1924.
My goodness.
And that's what and you
And that
would
was a-
dance to
that-
one record the whole night because it was so big, and it would turn over and play the other side. It was punctured like when you had a pump piano. you know.
Oh,
But it was a metal disc. I always wondered what happened to it. And
My
we
goodness.
had the best time, and it may have cost you a dime
my
to
goodness.
go to rent this. That's all. You'd pay, each one would pay a dime, and you went at 7, you went home at 9. Well, we
Huh.
were 14. We weren't allowed out like the kids are today at 14. But that was what happened, and the firehouse would have one, and the Catholic Church would have one over the firehouse because they didn't have a place to have it. And it might start with like a cake sale or something, and then at a certain hour, they would put records on, and then all the young people would come and dance.
Huh.
But that's what you had to do. There was nothing else to do.
Yeah.
And kept everybody out of trouble.
Mm-hmm. So you didn't feel deprived at all?
Oh, no, no.
And you went to the movies in Hastings?
Oh, yes. And at that time, we were just talking about that yesterday, Eddie Hewitt played the piano
Oh,
and he was terrific. And you know, every time it come to the Indian, and everybody would be clapping in time to it. And if he played a song, everybody knew everybody sang because they were silent movies in those days.
my goodness.
But you see, people did make their own fun. They didn't want instant enjoyment.
Yeah.
They worked at it.
Yeah.
And that's what the kids don't do today.
I suppose, were you able to have any vacations?
No, not really. I don't remember going away during the war years.
Frank must have gotten some time off.
Oh, he
I
got
hope.
time off, but I don't think we went away at that time, because I think even vacation times, he was on call. And I don't think, we may have gone to see my mother and father if they weren't too far away, but
Where would they be?
Connecticut
Oh,
or Upper New York, somewhere. But I don't remember us going on anything drastic. And Frank had relatives in Maryland, and we went down there, but that was not war years.
now how about the health of the village? Did many of the local dentists and doctors, weren't a number of them called?
I would imagine so, but I couldn't tell you who did.
You weren't affected by
No,
not
our
having a doctor?
doctors didn't go.
Uh-huh.
And so, no. See, again, we had all older men in town. We had Dr. Dorfler, who was older. We had Dr. What his name was, isn't it? Dr. Jenks. And we had another one who lived right next door to Dr. Dorfler. And then Dr. Parsons came in with him, and then Dr. Parsons moved to Dobbs Ferry.
So that as far as your family's health was concerned?
No, our doctors were here.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think we've about covered everything. Did Ginger start school before the end of the war?
She didn't go to school till let's say, about 44, 45, she started kindergarten.
Do you remember if there were any special instructions that the kids were given?
No, I don't remember that at all. see, because by the time Ginger was 5, Hap was 14. And I know, I don't remember anything about that at all, about instruction. I do know that Dr. Hopkins cornered me into being on the board of the PTA. I was the youngest one of his students, the first one that ever came back with children. And he always called me his little girl with pigtails. I was a little bit older at that point. But he wanted me to be on that board. And Hap was in high school. And he said, we're going to start a high school PTA, and you're gonna set it up. I said, I don't know what to do. You'll find out. I said, I can't do it. Ginger comes to school on the afternoon bus. I don't have a car. And I said, on Tuesday morning, she comes to school in the morning, and you come with her. So I worked on the PTA at that time, but I don't remember particularly any war thing connected. I was so involved with children at PTA, and believe you me, I went to PTA till Ginger graduated out of high school. I said I spent my life, because I was class mother for Hap's class, from the time it evolved when he went to kindergarten. So it was really funny.
Okay, those activities weren't curtailed during the war
Well,
or affected in
you
any
see,
way?
that was, but I don't remember much talk about the war at that time. All I know is that I did not have a car when Ginger was going to kindergarten. And she went by bus from, she didn't go to kindergarten until we moved to 294 Old Broadway. And then the bus picked her up because she couldn't walk, and I couldn't take her. There were no sidewalks over there. You wouldn't dare walk. And that was when I got involved with high school. Before that, I was class mother, perhaps class till the end of time. But it was good. It kept me busy, and I enjoyed it. And I met a lot of the children, and they were wonderful kids.
Well, doesn't sound as if your life was terribly disrupted by the war.
It really wasn't. It really wasn't. That's what I said. I didn't know that I could be of much help because it did not affect my body except in, and then as usual, it was always Frank that was the center, and life revolved about what he was doing. And at that point then, my mother came and lived with me. Oh, Frank's mother came and lived with us.
Oh.
And I had her to contend with. And then after she died, my mother came and lived with me. So I was a busy little bee.
Yes, I
And
can
I had
see
an
you.
8-room house to take care of, and 2 children, and Frank and a mother-in-law. So
you
life
were...
was real, life was earnest,
Uh-huh.
but I never got in any trouble. I was too
Well, that's
busy.
good.
I
Well,
was too busy.
thanks
and
very
I wouldn't
much.
change a
Yeah.
minute of it. I wouldn't at all.
Well, that's good. I'm glad nothing bad happened to you during the wars.
No, it didn't. I mean, Frank's mother died, his father died, but I mean, the war itself had nothing to do with what happened to him.
Well, I'm glad you were so lucky.
I am glad too. I said God's been very good to us, and he still is.
Well, fine. Thanks ever so much.